This bonus series was launched in cooperation with 6 Swiss Exchange. It focused on companies that completed the Sparks IPO Academy course, a 6-month fast-track IPO training program designed for high-potential scale-ups. And now, on with the show.
Waking up every morning and fighting a cause or going after a cause that you really believe in with people you obviously like and you have selected yourself. I think it's clearly one of the luxuries that entrepreneurs have.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Sylvan.
Christian, a very well welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. It's a pleasure to have you as a guest today.
Thank you very much, Sylvan. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here and very much looking forward to having this discussion with you.
Same here. You're the co-founder and CEO at bComp, a global leader in advanced renewable material solutions. Before we talk about your company's journey, you actually got your PhD in material sciences from the EPFL and then went on to work for an aluminium manufacturer, right? Before starting bComp in 2011. So I wonder what sort of led you to leave this stable, secure, safe corporate life?
Sure. So it's right that I joined Alcan. It's the company is now called Constellium. They had this vision and ambition to build an innovation hub. Early 2000s or mid 2000s, it was the big topic of innovation. Everybody wanted to actually innovate rather than just do R&D. Mm-hmm. And so I joined this innovation hub, innovation sales, it was called back then, as an innovation project manager. And I just found myself generating and putting together a lot of slides for 2 or 3 years, trying to convince people, trying to be an intrapreneur in a very large corporate organization with cultural mixes from Canadian, French, and also Swiss backgrounds. I just found it quite frustrating, to be honest, in the sense that I spent a lot of time trying to convince people, in general, quite risk-averse people who, found it very hard to actually make a decision. And you found yourself going with changing the pitch slide, going to the next internal stakeholder, trying to convince that person. And so making circles, we didn't really get anywhere. And at the same time, I had this bComp project kind of hanging, which was a garage thing still back then. And that's where, I guess we'll talk about it a bit more, but that's where we got the opportunity and the stars sort of aligned, and we said, let's go and push that button. And I often say also when I give early stage startup training and stuff that, sometimes you need to do things to understand that you're not actually made for it. So right. For me, typically this corporate experience was necessary for me to understand that I wasn't designed and made for corporate life.
So it was sort of an easy decision for you to then move on and start your own company.
Absolutely, yeah.
And where does your entrepreneurial drive come from? Did you have any role models in your family that inspired you? Or did you always feel that somewhere within you that, hey, one day I want to start my own company?
I had maybe not so much within the family. I mean, my dad was an engineer, and he was, he had a senior position in a company, in a Swiss company, and I think was very entrepreneurial in the way he managed the company and the responsibilities he had. One thing, I don't know why, but already during high school, I often said that eventually I wanted to create something, but I didn't really know what that meant for me in terms of, creating. And then it wasn't before I actually participated to the venture challenge that was called last, back then. I think it has changed, but the format is still very similar. So hosted by Venture Lab back then, and so it's these classes that you take. I think 10 times 4 hours in the evening between 5 and 9, and I just found it really mind blowing. The people who presented there. And just this entrepreneurial mindset. That's the first time I think in my life that I really experienced this entrepreneurial mindset, and I got totally fascinated by it. And I really thought for myself, wow, this is actually what I want to do. This is what creating means for me. I really want to go and start my own company, a venture, and I think that's where it really started.
And getting this missing piece that corporate life couldn't get you to actually execute and build, because that's probably the most rewarding part.
Absolutely, it is. It's really this, having this idea, be passionate and convinced of the mission that you've set for yourself and for the team, and then also I think going after it with people you've actually chosen. Right at the beginning, you handpick the people, you partner up with people you trust in, and then you handpick your teammates on the way, and waking up every morning and fighting a cause or going after a cause that you really believe in with people you obviously like and you have selected yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's it's clearly one of the luxuries that entrepreneurs have.
Despite all the challenges that come with it too, of course.
Of course.
You mentioned you started out as a garage project. So very cliche, startup in a garage. Take us back to these days. What were you doing? How did these early days of bComp look like?
It is very cliche indeed. And it really started in Julian's garage. So one of the co-founders. Julian is a top-notch engineer, but also he's very handy. He's very good with actually making things with his hands. And we had this obsession of building the lightest possible skis. And so we met once, twice per week in his garage, building these skis, making things lighter. We got inspired by one of other co-founder, Cyril Boinet, who had founded DB Drake Boinet Skis some years before. And the structure they had chosen to build those skis was actually really smart. And so we just decided to take that concept and bring it to the next level. So we were literally meeting, twice a week in the evenings and building skis. It sounds very cheesy, but it is what it is. And that's where also eventually we came across natural fiber composites. It was very early stage in the sense that it started being a topic in the academic environment. We took it there. We ordered some flax fabrics. We incorporated them into the structures, into the skis we built, and that's where it actually started.
And this was sort of your own problem that you tried to solve there because you're all passionate skiers, or where did the motivation to build lightweight skis come from?
I think there was a bit that frustration that, it was the period where the fat skis came. So from a very, very long piste skis heritage, which were built with heavy wooden cores, and actually did the job on piste. And then eventually, what ski manufacturers did is just to use the same construction, making skis wider. Yeah. So there were some people around, and DB skis clearly were pioneers in that sense, who started thinking of new ways and new structures to actually build the skis. Not just scaling the weight along with the size or the width of the skis. Yeah. So I think that was clearly one driver, but then also it started, the free touring started to pick up. Resorts started to be quite crowded with free skiers, and so really incorporating also the fact that eventually we would have to carry the skis up the hill, but we still wanted to have fun wide skis actually to ski then. Those were kind of the driving elements. Amazing.
And then how do you go from building innovative new skis to building a company? That was still quite a big step. So you sort of said you saw the potential of the material that you were using. How do you then start the company out of working on your skis in the garage?
Yeah, well, there is actually a business case we built based on making skis. So basically taking what Cyril had started with DB before. He had sold his part of the company, and that was continuing in the US with his former partner. And so there was this idea initially that we could say, well, we could improve that, get rid of the mistakes they have done, and launch a ski company. It was a period where ski companies just popped out of the ground like mushrooms, with people like Faction Skis or Black Crows. A lot of people know that was a period. So Cyril had a very strong point there, and he said, "Look, guys, it will eat up tremendous resources in terms of marketing budget. It will be very tough to make our little place in the sun." So we said, well, why not actually take a step back, and instead of going to the B2C configuration, build a B2B company. So suddenly these people who eventually will become your competitors become your customers. In terms of marketing budget, that means that instead of launching all the campaigns you need to do to get visibility, we would go to the ISPO in Munich, which is the world's largest ski or winter sports equipment fair in the year. We would go there every year in January, February, meet all our customers within a week, and start selling what really made the difference in the ski, which was the core itself. So that's where we had identified the lightweight potential. So we had really put a lot of effort in designing the ski core. And that approach worked out. So we were able to acquire the first customers very quickly with faction skis, actually, and scale then into the winter sports industry from there.
That sounds amazing. And was that then also sort of the switch where you decided to, okay, we leave this from an evening project and we actually go and build a company full time?
It was very much, I mean, it was actually, so we took the decision even before. So at some point, we had done some ski poles with the flax fiber composites. And I will always remember we had this meeting in Fribourg in a restaurant just outside Fribourg, the four co-founders together, and Cyril had told me, Christian, think about it. You know, it might be a good time, a good moment in time. So he had a career change. I was tired of my corporate experience, and we said, well, let's meet, you know, Saturday in a week, and we'll go for brunch, and then we decide where we take it from, and. So I was pretty confident that I wanted to leave my job, and I had discussed it with my wife. So we got there, and Cyril, you know, just said, well, I actually quit my job. So are you up for it, Christian? And I was like, whoa, okay, sure. You know, let's do it. So 2 out of the 4 co-founders, we've already basically checked out on that day and said, okay, we dropped the former job. And then we had a very hardcore approach to it, in a sense that we defined milestones, and we said, okay, by then we need to have secured seed money. By then we need to understand where we're going to be sitting in terms of the offices. And that worked out quite well. We then went to Fribourg. That's where we found our home base. And so, you know, we were all quite mature in the sense that we had already some experience, some professional career. Some of us had families. So it was no option to do the hardcore eating pasta and drinking water for a year or two and looking what happens. So we had a quite systematic approach from there. But it was a very important moment, also in the sense, you know, with my wife, in the sense that we have this deal that each of us has a joker once in life. And so I got home that evening and said, Jenny, this is my joker. I take it. You're going to cover my back. And then, of course, you know, quitting the job with a lot of insecurity in terms of revenue for at least the first and second year. But yes, here we are.
That was a huge step to take. But I wonder, this plan that you made with these very clear and specific milestones, did that also help you to not only gain more clarity yourself, but also to really get your partners on board to say, hey, look, we have a plan, and that's how you can measure us against the plan? Yeah,
absolutely. So clearly it was, you know, and I remember also when we went pitching for seed capital, it was clear that, you know, eventually we had this amount of chances, of cards to play. Eventually one of them had to play out, and it worked out with Seed Capital Fribourg. But that was exactly it. I think it helps, like always, right? Putting steps and milestones to a problem helps taking out the emotionality of it. Absolutely. And that's exactly what we did there. Yeah.
Fantastic. And you talked about your co-founders. Originally, you were 4 co-founders. How did the 4 of you meet?
Around skiing, actually. So there was Cyril with this project, with the DB Skis project, and then Andreas had done a project on it during his studies at the University of Applied Sciences in Fribourg. And I couldn't actually tell you exactly how. So 2 of us met at some party in Lucerne, Cyril and I, at some point, and eventually we just gathered and said, look, we would need Julien's support in terms of really hardcore R&D, and then Andreas and Cyril had worked together before, so that kind of happened naturally, even though we didn't know each other really before.
Nice. So just how life plays out, right?
Exactly.
Random acquaintances.
Exactly.
However, then, and I think that's very normal in many startups' journeys, you then sort of went from 4 to 2 operationally involved co-founders.
That's right.
How do you manage that? Is that something that was a challenge for you to navigate, because you sort of lost half your co-founders? Or on the other hand, was that actually a good and a very natural development? How did you experience it?
I think a bit of both, in the sense that objectively, if you look at it, it was natural the way it happened. Of course, when you are in it, as it happens, it can be quite painful, right? Yeah. Clearly, yes. So we were four. We were also clear that we didn't have the resources, neither the resources or really maybe the work also to keep all the four of us busy. Andreas had a good setup where he was able to work part-time at the University of Applied Sciences in Fribourg. So Cyril and I started, and then Julia eventually joined about 6-8 months later. We had the funding to cover the three, salaries, of course, quite thin one, but still to be able to finance the three of us through the first year. And then what happened, my analysis is that clearly, eventually Andreas, for him, the situation of having one foot at the school and one foot at bComp was not really satisfying. Eventually, he wanted to have a decision from us whether we wanted to have him on board. I think there was a bit too many overlaps between him and Cyril. They have a similar background, even though they're very different in the way now their career has developed. Mm-hmm. So that was where Andreas dropped out after 18 months, I believe. And then we went on with the three co-founders, Cyril, Julia, and myself, until 2017. And so we had been developing bComp for 5 years then. Yeah. And that's, if you look at the profile and the career of Cyril, he's a serial entrepreneur. That's his thing, right? So eventually there was a big discussion whether we should continue developing bComp more of as a lifestyle company, focusing on the recreational market, so sports and leisure industry, like we had started, where Julia and I were very eager to explore the opportunity in mobility and the large-scale mobility space, where we saw that's really where we have the scaling effect, where we could grow really big. And that's really where we didn't agree, and I think very healthy discussions where eventually Cyril said, "Look, I think I'm going to be in your way now with the plans and where you want to go." We found a very good agreement between the three of us of letting him go, but still having a fair setup. Yeah. And that's where then Julia and I, from where we then took it. And actually that correlates also with Series B fundraising, where we said, okay, we were break even 15, 16. So, we managed to build a healthy company with 10, 12 people back then. But that's where we said, okay, if we want to give us a fair chance to actually scale into the large scale mobility industry, we need to pick up more funds. We need to build a team, professionalize the team, and then take it from there.
Amazing. And talking about the fair setup, when a co-founder is leaving, it's always difficult probably to have this conversation, especially if they have worked for multiple years in the company. How do you sort of protect the company in terms of getting the shares back and making sure that you don't have shareholders who are maybe not either putting a lot of money in the company or working full-time on the company?
That's a tough one, Silvan. I wish I had the answer, but eventually it goes back to the concept of fairness, right? What exactly that is, and how you can build a fair setup for everyone is very, very difficult. As soon you know perfectly well from your own experience, as soon you've started really to put sweat and tears into the venture, started working. Everybody contributes in the way he or she can. Some people have different personal setups, and other people can deal better with pressure and can actually invest more into the venture. So I find it very difficult eventually to find a way to really make it fair for everyone. The way we solved it is really to sit down and say, okay, what's your feeling? What would be a fair solution now? And for the ones staying in the venture. I think it worked out well, and I'm very thankful to Cyril the way we eventually sorted it out. But I don't think there is a good kind of a one size fits all solution to that problem. Fact is that it didn't harm our investability. What happened there? So also linked to we solved it within founders, and the other shareholders, they waived their rights, so they really let this cleanup operation happen. So I think it's very important also that you have a healthy relationship with the shareholders around you,
Absolutely.
letting you sort out these things when they eventually happen. And as you say, I think it's very natural.
That's just life.
It's just life, right?
Absolutely. Did he then end up buying his shares back, or how did you solve it in the end?
That's what we did, yes.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
I personally think that's probably the best way from a company perspective. If you think, what do we need to do to solve and protect the company?
Yeah.
But I see there are many angles to that depending on which perspective you take.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's also talk about your company and your products. You offer two separate solutions, the ampliTex and the power ribs. Are all of these based on flax today?
They are based on flax, and maybe it's important also to zoom out again and talk about. We started talking about bCores, right?
Sure.
So the bCores were a mix of balsa wood, the lightest wood on earth.
Yeah.
Most people might remember it from making airplanes when they were kids. We blended balsa wood and reinforced it with the flax fiber.
Yeah.
And that business picked up really nicely, and we scaled. We scaled quickly into the ski industry. Eventually, the importance of lightweighting in the ski industry kind of faded away. Plus, there were competition, other lightweight woods that were not as light as our solution, but lower cost. And eventually, we just saw also that the synergies with the ampliTex and the power ribs products was not given anymore. So we divested that product 2 years ago, really to focus on the flax-based product. So back to your question, yes, both are using flax fibers. So there is a high level of synergies between these two products, and actually they are together jointly. They build a solution. And the power ribs solution is, imagine the ribs on a leaf. It's a way we found to organize to avoid smearing the material into the surface, and organize a ribbed structure on the B side of a material. Think typically of a body panel of a race car, the hood, for instance. Yeah. So on the B side, you would have a ribbed structure, so you won't see it, but that's actually the backbone of the part. And that innovation allows us to compete against carbon fiber composites. So really reaching high performance applications in specific cases. And then the ampliTex is really, most of us know the carbon fiber composites from the bike frame or from the tennis racket. Yeah. So it's really the same approach. So we have a reinforcement material. We organize the fibers in a certain, the smartest possible way, and then we add a plastic, a resin to it, and together they make a composite material. And it allows you to remove a lot of weight, because if you would just to use plastic alone, the properties would be quite poor, translating in a lot of material being used to perform a certain function.
Amazing.
Yeah. So jointly they make a solution. Now there are cases where we only use the ampliTex. The power ribs are never used on their own, because they really, again, they're just a grid that provide the structure. But in some applications where lightweighting is not so critical, then ampliTex would be the solution for the customer.
And can you also explain us why flax is sort of the king of sustainable materials?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are clearly other ways to go for more circular and sustainable materials. So number one, for us, it's very important that we build a performance solution. Lightweighting was very core when we started bComp. Julia and I, back then, the markets wouldn't pay a premium for green yet. So we were really obsessed with developing a solution that would outperform the benchmark according to standard engineering metrics. So we need to perform a certain function for applications, be it in the sports and leisure industries, but also in the mobility industries, and we'll talk a bit about that later. And considering that there is a baseline, there's a reference material, we want to replace it and make things better, right? And now, so there we managed to develop that solution based on flax fiber composites. And then from there, of course, eventually boosted by the COVID crisis, green credentials suddenly become a very, very strong USP for our solutions. So, in terms of our offering, there are many examples where actually the green credentials now, the CO2 footprint that we reduce versus what we replace has become more important than the lightweighting itself. So back to your question, why flax? There are two things that are important with flax. Number one, it's a supply chain that has been around for centuries. we all know flax from the linen textile industry. And so, linen was used by the Egyptians for mummification. So it's a material that has been has been around for very long. There are supply chains that are very mature to serve the textile industry. That's one aspect, and the other aspect is that what we call the intrinsic mechanical properties are very high. So the fiber itself has high mechanical properties. If you manage to extract it properly and organize it in a way that you make a reinforcement fabric rather than making a home or a fashion textile, then you actually get a highly engineered material out of it.
Amazing. And we heard that you sort of pivoted away from skis towards the mobility space. So what are these materials used for today?
So it's not actually a pivoting in the sense that pivoting in my understanding is that you let something behind and you focus on something new.
Fair. You found a different application.
Exactly. Yeah. But clearly, so the sweet spot we found for our applications is things that need to be light, thin, and stiff. So when you think of it, typically so I mentioned the automotive industry before. So panels, body panels, typically they are exactly that. So they are mostly made from metals, from aluminum alloys. They are thin, they're light, and they are designed for stiffness. So they need to resist wind pressures, and also when you sit on the hood of your car and things like that. So that's one of the sweet spots for our technology. And so you think exterior, but then you can also think interior. If you look around you when you're sitting in the car, there are what we call the door panels, where you have the handles and the buttons integrated, to put your window up and down. So there's a multitude of applications both outside and inside the car. We identified the motorsports sector back in 2016 as our stepping stone into the large-scale mobility sector, and motorsports is interesting in many ways. So number one, if you look at, of course, our market entry into recreational is very passion driven, right? It came from our passion for skis.
Of course, yeah.
Now, when we explain that to potential investors today, we have a very entrepreneurial and logical way to explain things, where according to which the sports and leisure industry, or recreation as we call it, it features very low entry barriers. So it's a very lowly regulated market that translates into low entry barriers, that translates into short time to market. That was very important for us as an early stage startup. Now, when you look at the automotive industry, it's the opposite. It's a bit of a Champions League of the industries.
Yeah, exactly. That's like where the big guys play, sort of. And every tiny detail matters so much, right?
Exactly. So it's very highly regulated. It's very heavy on processes. It's very heavy on quality management. Yeah. And we said, okay, in order to get there and be credible as an automotive player, we use the motorsports niche as an entry door. Yeah. The interesting thing is it's a bit at the interface, and some people say, well, motorsports is the sports and leisure of wealthy people, and so it's a similar market like we were used to. Yeah. The design cycle times are also very quick, but the very interesting thing is that basically all car makers have a motorsports department and use it as an innovation platform and marketing platform.
Of course.
So once they have validated novel technologies for the motorsports sector, then they will work with the suppliers to validate them for their road cars. And that's where the scaling effect comes.
I see.
Yeah.
And how do you price your materials? Do you just pay per certain amount of weight or shape, or how do you price your products? Because you don't have the traditional software, give me some recurring revenue business model.
It's a good question. And we struggled with it for a long time. And so what we came up with, because it's also important, I think, for our listeners to understand that we actually say, we might make it sound like we sell parts, but we actually sell the semi-finished product. So we sell a product, a material on rolls or in sheets, and we sell them to the parts manufacturers, who then mold them into the parts, into the final parts.
So it's sort of raw material for them a bit.
Exactly. So what we really look at is at the function that we perform. So clearly, purchases, in the example where we replace injected plastic in a car interior for a seat back, for instance, then the purchases often will refer to, as a kilo price or something. Yeah. And when you look at that, of course, we're much more expensive because the material is much more complex. There's a much higher level of engineering involved in making that material.
Of course.
However, so you need, of course, to look at the function. So we look at the final part price and try to understand exactly the pricing structure for our customer, and then understanding also factoring in what is the lightweighting, what is the value of lightweight for the customer. The most extreme example is when we talk about airplanes. Of course, there's a very direct correlation between the weight of the airplane and the kerosene that's used. So you can actually factor that into your solution, assuming that you remove a certain amount of kilos.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's this sort of premium. Then there is typically also now the green credentials more and more, right? So car makers go out and say, we need your help to decarbonize our supply chain. And then we say, well, what's the value of that decarbonizing? So we have a solution to help you decarbonize your supply chain. So then you look at figures like social cost of carbon. What is society prepared to pay for it? Sometimes the purchasers start having figures also. Yeah. So long story short, we try as much as possible to do value-based pricing, understanding what are the factors that make our solution more interesting than what the customer is using today. But eventually, that's one side of the thing, and then you have also the cost targets of the purchasers and of the vehicle program leaders. Yeah. So the reality is generally somewhere between, somewhere there, right?
Makes sense. But I love this value-priced approach. I think that's the way to go for anyone building a solution. And at the same time, that also sort of limits your customer base. So who are your customers today?
So today, clearly, so we have, customers like K2 for the ski industry, which historically are our oldest customers now. So that is an example in the recreational space. Mm-hmm. In the motorsports sector, we serve pretty much all famous motorsports players. So if you think of what we call customer racing, so GT racing, be it Porsche Motorsports, Audi Motorsport, Aston Martin Racing. We have a very tight collaboration with McLaren Racing also. So our material is being used in some of the Formula One cars in the seats of Lando Norris. Typically.
That's cool.
That's very cool. And so that's a set of customers. Yeah. And now we're working very tightly together with mostly with the motherships of the motorsports sectors, but then also Volvo cars. So we started delivering our material solution into the new EX30 of Volvo. So that was also a major milestone for the company. And we started delivering into this vehicle program just 2 months ago.
Well, that's a huge step, because you go sort of from, I assume, smaller pieces and smaller volumes to higher volumes.
It's especially the volumes. There are some very large parts. If you think of a hood of a Porsche GT4, that sort of car, that's very big. Yeah. But then it's true that once you start scaling, we talk typically in the motorsports space about hundreds, max a couple of thousand cars per year for one motorsports player. Yeah. And then suddenly you talk about 100,000 plus, right? So it's 2 orders of magnitude larger. Yeah. You can imagine it generates quite some stress into the organization, of course, to make that step.
And that's exactly the topic I want to talk about next, because you've been around for 12 years. Yeah. So among these 12 years, you have grown quite a lot. What were some of the biggest growth challenges that you had to overcome so far?
I think, there are, I would say, twofold. Number one is reaching these milestones that are key to enter a certain vertical. No. So typically, if you think of the automotive industry, we started collaborating with Polestar. Clearly they are our early adopter for the large scale automotive industry, and they just helped us understanding the rules of the game, and also told us, guys, you are new to the automotive space. You will be single material supply for us. It's all, everything that the purchasing organization hates. That's what you are. So, one thing they told us typically is you need to be IATF certified. So the IATF stands for International Automotive Task Force. It's like ISO 9001, but powered by 3. It's a big chunk of processes and things you need to set up. Yeah. So that's just an example to show how you need to transform the organization to adapt for these new markets that you're adding to your marketing strategy or to the targets. those are clearly the big milestones, I think. And then along with that, I mean, the second dimension clearly is the people you build, right? The team you build around that, and it's sometimes a bit painful to understand and accept that the team you had for early stage, from seed to Series A, typically, it's not the same team you need to then go into the scale up phase, which is not the same team you need to then actually build a materials tech supplier that that supplies the material solution into the automotive industry.
That is a huge challenge. I think that many startups that grow also face on their own. And this culture change from, hey, we're a startup, we're sort of trying things out, we all know each other, to a scale up. I think you now have more than 70 employees. This is a change, and you probably triple or double multiple times. So how do you make sure that you adapt the people you need, because you said they change, but also keep the culture intact? Because with different people, you also have sort of a change in culture, I would assume.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe the first thing is to understand and accept that you won't be able to keep exactly the same culture, right? Yeah. As you just say, I mean, it's a completely different thing having 5-12 people fighting for this early stage startup than actually having a team of 75 with professional automotive project managers who exactly know, by the book, how an automotive project needs to be run and all of that. And which also implies that you need to play according to the rules, right?
Of course.
So I think trying to understand what is really the core of your culture, in the sense of, what is the DNA of bComp? What is it we really want to maintain, and push through the different phases, and maintain through the different phases, while reshaping, the kind of the macro thing, or the macro culture, from step to step, and accepting that it has to change, and accepting that new people with different mindsets will come into the organization, eventually changing the culture. So I think it's a very fine balance to keep also the right amount of, I call them the pioneers, the ones that were around since year one, basically. Who see, of course, that change, who see that there are more cumbersome processes coming on, that you just don't go to whatever person and sort it out, with 2 or 3 people, but sometimes it needs a bit more of more political discussions and involving more people. I find it a very difficult balance. So I think we've done pretty good at actually understanding what is the core of our culture, and protecting it as much as possible, while accepting that things change. Also accepting that some people might not be the right ones anymore, for a new phase of the adventure.
I think that's the brutal reality, but it's also a very normal course of any scale up. What are some of the key roles that you had to hire and also introduce to the company when you were actually growing up to these 70 people? What were some things that really changed in terms of roles of people?
I think the first, so if I think back, there's a strong correlation between fundraising steps and increasing the level of professionality of the team. I always say at the beginning, we were 4 co-founders. Everyone takes the piece of the cake that she or he likes, right?
Of course.
And then, but there's a heckload of other pieces still around, right? And then, typically, in my example, I took the supply chain and the supply network piece. With no clue, no education whatsoever in supply chain management, purchasing, and so forth. So each of the 3 other ones had other pieces which they were not really comfortable with. You go along, you do your bootstrapping, and eventually you realize, okay, typically with in the purchasing, the operations part, in 2017 we realized, okay, now it's really getting difficult for me to handle that supply chain topic. It's now the next step to actually hire a proper operations manager, who then became our COO, and who really brought our operations to the next level. Then also, so that I think 2017 was one of the important, when we zoomed out and said, okay, which are the important steps? We also onboarded a marketing manager who became our chief marketing officer, who was very strong in B2B marketing. But also then, since she had an economics background, I told her, look, but you actually need also to keep our finance together, because we don't have the resources to also onboard a CFO right now.
Of course.
So, and that's all about, that's the bootstrapping mindset, is that you go as far as possible with each of these topics until things start breaking apart.
Exactly.
Right?
I think that's the right way to grow. Then we have an issue here. We need to fix it.
Yeah.
We can't handle it anymore.
Yeah.
So I heard COO, CMO, CFO in sort of one person. What did he do with sales, for example?
And I mean, sales was another topic. Like clearly, where Cyril was holding, was managing the sales before he left, and then we said, okay, that's the occasion. I mean, each time when someone leaves, eventually it creates an opportunity for novelty, right? And we said, okay, it's the opportunity to actually onboard for the first time someone who actually understands and has the automotive experience. So we knew in 2016-ish, about 17, that we had decided, okay, we want to go into mobility. And I had the chance I was able to fool Per into the company. So we knew each other we knew one another from the studies. I was an exchange student in Sweden. He then was an exchange student in Lausanne at EPFL. We met there. We started skiing. Like, there are a lot of things starting at bComp with skiing.
Absolutely.
We became friends, and he has a similar background like I have. Did a composites career in Sweden. Eventually, then ended up at Volvo Cars. And at one of the early stage meetings I had at Volvo, I stayed at his place, and I said, "Look, Per, if you want to change something about your career, at some point in time, I think that would be good. It would be a good moment now." And it was kind of a joke, I mean. And he said, "Well, why not? That would be cool to move back to Switzerland after all these years."
Boom.
Yeah. And then he said, "Christian, maybe you should talk to my wife also." And I said, "Okay, okay." So long story short, Per moved his family from Gothenburg to the Lausanne area, and took over the chief sales officer role. He has been doing that for more than 6 years. So he was also part of that first level kind of, increasing the level of professionalism. And, and all the entire, I mean, he was working on the Polestar 1 project at Volvo Cars back then. So he came with a tremendous network. And that helped us, of course, a lot to get the early adopters on board, to understand their mindset, to understand also, kind of translate their language and implement first things into the company. So yeah, these are these, in terms of personnel, these are the big changes where you need to dare sometimes. Of course, I'm nervous when he says, "Okay, I'm going to move my family down to." You're like, "Whoa, the cash runway right now is that many months, but is that okay?" So, but those are the things, the bold decisions you have to take sometimes. Yeah.
I love it how you make it sound so natural. All sort of fit together, right people, right timing, right place, I guess. Despite the personal network, how else did you recruit key personnel in this growth phase? Because that's probably one of the biggest challenges. You know who you need, but where and how do you recruit them?
Yeah, I think, and that's where maybe also the startup ecosystem, the awards, and all of that. I think that's quite important. Not only, of course, to win prize money at the beginning and finance your venture early stage, but also to build credibility and visibility. So level 1 between seed round and Series A, I think we did a great job within the Swiss ecosystem, and the first people you need are engineers, right? When you build a tech startup. Yeah. So building this credibility, having a network also still into EPFL, and also then developing it at ETH. Building an attractive story, of course, for them. We are in a phase, especially in the 2010 plus. It's when it flipped from being, where people had this perception of you did a startup. Are you crazy? Like, of course. Are you
Things
sure?
changed. They were different back then.
Are you sure you want to waste your education on such a crazy idea?
Right.
This is the coolest thing on earth, right? I want to join a startup. So I think we took a lot of advantage in the early stage of number one, our strong network into the tech high schools in Switzerland, and then also the visibility we managed to build within the Swiss startup ecosystem. Yeah. And then stage 2, clearly 2 years ago we closed Series B, during which in the framework of which we onboarded the BMW iVentures as our lead investor, followed by the Volvo Tech Fund, Airbus Ventures, Porsche Ventures, and actually also Generali. But clearly, in terms of building again credibility within the automotive industry and towards the ecosystem in terms of hiring or potential talent for us. That was very important. So now suddenly people say, "Ooh, okay, it's not just a cool Swiss tech startup anymore. They actually have, they got the stamp from these big names. So there must be something about it.
It's real.
It's real, exactly.
Yeah.
So and I always also say to the students, to the young entrepreneurs, if there's one thing that's the common denominator to all startups, independently of space, it's this thing about building credibility. That's what we all do every day, right? Towards your employees, towards your potential employees, exactly, towards shareholders, supply network, you name it, right? And so I think but we feel now that really with this the visibility we generated through Series B and all the strategic investors we were able to onboard on our cap table, that had a tremendous impact on also the people we are able to hire now.
Yeah. I love that, because it shows that you really have to put a lot of thought into that to also think, what signal can I do by having this investor on board? Yeah. That's super crucial. Another thing that you're working on at the moment, you participate in the Swiss Stock Exchange training program, the Sparks IPO Academy. It's basically a program that prepares companies for an IPO. So first of all, I want to know what motivated you to participate in this program.
Sure. It's actually Tobias, our CFO, who participated. And clearly, number one, we want to keep all the options open, right? So it's clear that we don't have a strong IPO culture in Switzerland. We have seen some very spectacular cases with On in New York, for example, right? Yeah. But there are very few IPOs in Switzerland, actually, and especially coming out of the tech startup ecosystem that's very rich. Yeah. So we said, okay, well, that's clearly something that we're interested in. Tobias and myself have this, personal interest and think, wow, that would actually be a very cool thing. Yeah. So that was really the trigger, not more and not less. And we discussed it with the board and said, yeah, sure, it's an interesting option. Let's keep it open. And first things first, we don't have a clear exit strategy in our shareholder agreement. So again, letting things open, let's go and explore.
They will naturally find their way, I guess. And what are some of the main takeaways, if you can share any, from the program?
Number one, it is an option, right? Yeah. Number two, we are not ready for it yet. So clearly we said we need this Series C that we're just doing now. But clearly, let's continue working on it. And I'm going next week to London to an event that's co-organized by them together with the Swiss Chamber of Commerce.
Amazing.
Where they want to bring along people out of the English ecosystem, which has a much stronger culture in terms of small and mid-cap IPOs, and really, starting this discussion, fostering the discussions, but also exposing the Swiss ecosystem to this mindset that is much more small and mid-cap IPO, driven. So I think it's really what it is right now. I think we're in exploration mode. Some of us are very interested in I think that would be a very attractive option. And as I said, last but not least, we're personally very much driven by such an option.
That makes a lot of sense. And what would sort of be the main advantages of doing an IPO on Sparks or the SIX main market?
It's a good question. Number one, I think it's something we have a bit too little maybe in Switzerland is what I call a healthy portion of economical patriotism, if I may. I know this, the word patriotism is generally, has this negative connotation. But typically when I see in Scandinavia, typically they're much stronger about, having being proud of your economy and of your key players, and taking well care of them. So I think we see a lot of Swiss startups eventually, in terms of funding, being absorbed by international funds, also being taken over by international companies. So there is certainly this aspect at bComp where we say, well, it would be cool to establish a big, an important automotive player or materials tech player, and keeping it in Switzerland.
Absolutely.
There's this, I think, this aspect to it. and not it's not, we haven't thought about it much further than that.
But I like this statement, and also that what you said before, it's possible. We can do IPOs in Switzerland.
Yes.
I love this mindset
Yes.
because I hope that this will generate more IPOs here in Switzerland.
Eventually, someone needs to start, right? And
Of course.
it's a bit, I've met many people tell me all the reasons why we would never make it within the automotive industry, and that's clear. It's something that triggers my interest when I hear people saying, "Christian, this is not going to make it. This is not going to work out." I'm like, Number one, if many people don't think it's going to work out, that gives a space for the ones, the foolish ones who think there might be chance, right? And number two, it's, as you say, I think we have this double function, as I always say, also in terms of decarbonizing the world, which is our purpose statement with our bio-based performance material solutions. It's to do our work ourselves, but it's also to inspire people, right? So I think if we get our game straight, of course, and our things straight, and eventually can show that it's possible, as you say, and same thing with the IPO in Switzerland. Again, it's very early stage for us, and there's not, but it's course. We have started to dream of it, and we'll keep on dreaming as long as no one comes and tells us why it's really not possible.
Oh, fantastic. So you say, to these naysayers, challenge accepted.
Exactly. That's exactly.
I love that. So we hear IPO is an option. What are other milestones that you are working on right now that you want to achieve over the next 12 to 24 months?
So I'm personally, and I think Julia and I, ever since we founded the company, we've been obsessed in bringing our material solution into mainstream cars, right? And clearly, with the Volvo EX30, that's the first part of the milestone achieved. We need to, scale properly now and get the second foot into the automotive industry. We have other vehicle programs in the pipeline. There will be a very big announcement actually by Polestar just now on November 9th about our collaboration. And so for me, it's really now, solidifying what we're doing with Volvo and then adding the vehicle programs that are queuing up in our project pipeline. Then I think we will be able to say, okay, we made it. We established bComp as a major player and as a materials tech company able to scale and able to serve large markets. From there on, we have started a collaboration with Lufthansa Technik 6 years ago. Now, when you talk about a highly regulated market, a very complicated market being automotive, then the passenger aircraft industry is
next level.
So we are now still at R&D/industrialization level with that project. You can imagine, things like fire resistance and what they call heat release. There are major things, major hurdles to overcome technically. But these are things. That's why I on purpose don't call ourselves an automotive supplier, because that's really not what we want to become. We have the strategic markets, and also motorsports and supercars continues to be an important vertical for us. So we'll keep on adding verticals wherever we think there is a good product market fit, and expand the global footprint. So we have now a team in China since a year. We're going to establish bComp China in January, actually. Now, if there's a focus on really, some of the material we sell go into cars in China or cars that are built in China. So we have to have, of course, our supply chain under control, the quality management under control. We now start with customer support in China, exploring, also commercial expansion, and then North America will be also on the target. So there is there is a lot of work still to come. It's fun when you build these companies. When you look back, you think, wow, we've done so much. But Absolutely. Then when you look what's left forward, it's always bigger.
It feels like you're still getting just started, right? Yeah, there's so much more to
exactly.
do. Absolutely. Hey, to wrap up the conversation today, we also have some rapid fire questions for you, Christian. So I'm just gonna give you different options to choose from, or a quick question, and you have to answer in one sentence.
Go for it.
Researcher or entrepreneur?
Entrepreneur, but entrepreneur. But my engineer's heart is bleeding a bit because of course.
Let's say research-backed entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
What's the ski record that you're most proud of?
I once did 15,000 verticals just skiing down in one day.
Wow.
So just taking the same cabin 15 times in a row, skipping. So we had lunch in the cabin, and we just pumped powder for a day. But that was, it makes me feel old because that was many years ago. And
That's fine.
Yeah,
That's fine. Is there any product that is made of bComp material that is part of your everyday life? Or not yet? Maybe soon the
not
Volvo
yet.
car.
Maybe soon the Volvo car. I wasn't able to, or I cannot afford to buy a Porsche GT4 race car or a BMW motorsports race car. So not yet. But yeah, eventually I think we're getting closer. And clearly, that's also when now we start talking about we're driving this old Volvo XC70 from that's 12 plus years. And the kids are saying, Christian, or Dad, well, they call me Dad, of course. They say, my kids say, Dad, the next car really needs to have bComp material in it. So we're working on it.
I love that. And what is the best quality a leader can have based on your experience?
I mean, a lot of people have said that before, but I think empathy is still the very core characteristic of any leadership. Yeah. Then, of course, there's many things you need to add to the empathy, right? You can't be just a good leader just with empathy. But I think that's the starting point.
Yeah. Yeah. If you had to pick one, that's it.
That's it.
Yeah. Fantastic. These were all my questions for today, Christian. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure and lots of success for the future. I'm sure we're going to hear and see much more from you and bComp.
Thank you very much, Silvan. It was a great pleasure, great fun, and a very interesting discussion. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.